This session is based on the Communication Practices Inventory you were asked to download and complete in Step 1 of this section. If you have not yet completed the inventory, please do so before proceeding. You will also need the Communication Practices Scorecard, which you downloaded in Step 5. If you have not yet downloaded it, please do so before proceeding. You all completed this practice inventory, right? So these are the questions for each scale. So if you look under initiative conversations for questions 2, 5, 8, 13, and 5, if you could score that for yourself. Look at 2, 5, 8, 13, and 15. Go to those first. 2, 5, 8, 13, and 15. And then just calculate your total for your answers. Just add up the scores for those, 2, 5, 8, 13, and 15. And then understanding conversations, if you look at 7, 9, 12, 14, and 18. 7, 9, 12, 14, and 18. And again, just total up your score for that. Those are understanding conversation practices. And then the performance conversations are 3, 4, 10, 16, and 17. And then closure are the remaining ones, 1, 6, 11, 19, and 20. So when you get those scores, it'll give you, so you have initiative conversations, understanding conversations, performance conversations, and closure conversations, and you have a scale from 20, well, the highest you can get on anyone is 25, 5. Almost nobody's down at a 5. So to give you a particular, if you look at your score, you can get kind of a profile. You know, you might be a, say you might be a 22 on initiative conversations and a 24 on understanding and a 18 and a 20. So it gives you a particular profile for the extent to which you engage in practices that are consistent with the 4 types of conversation. Okay, now the ideal state is a 25 across the board, which means you always engage in the practices. This doesn't get at how frequently you have those conversations. What it gets at is the extent to which you engage in practices that are consistent with the 4 productive conversations. Now, as an aside, we know that when people fill these out on themselves, even though it asks you to look from the standpoint, what would the people around you say? We know that people tend to overstate how well they do. Okay, so you could look at it from the standpoint is that, okay, well, this is kind of like the maximum. I may be a little less on that. And in different relationships, we could find even more variety. You know, that, yeah, on average I do that, but with Molly, I almost never have, I never do certain things, which would show up in that relationship. I would have a relationship given by the fact that that conversation is missing. So this gives you a sense of where you currently see yourself on the practices with regard to the different types of conversations. So a couple things about this. One, you're already engaged in the elements of these conversations, though not distinguished as such. So you're already doing things that of these 4 conversations. You're already having these 4 conversations. Excuse me. You just haven't necessarily identified those conversations. The second thing is it gives you an access for identifying as we go through this, if I just add that, I could dramatically change my results. So there aren't like huge things you got to change. We've found that there are really generally a few things that if people put those few things in their practices, just the practice side, if you add that element, has a huge impact on the results that they get. So that's the other thing. It gives you an access to these are the practices to be engaged in. And as we go through the conversations, you begin to see some of those more clearly. The thing this does not necessarily get at is whether you're using the conversations at the appropriate time kinds of thing, and how frequently you're using them. You know, you may be in circumstances in which you really do need to be using performance conversations more, but you use understanding conversations instead. So even though you use the right practices, you're using the wrong conversation, so you're not getting the results. Does that make sense?